like to call this very brief video tutorial, Let's Agree to Agree. That's because we're going to briefly discuss the whole notion of contracts. Contracts is an area of law where individuals and businesses create and define obligations and rights amongst themselves by agreement. Usually these agreements are in writing, and generally there's a tremendous amount of freedom between the individuals to decide what exactly has to go into the contract. Now, in terms of business, a contract is a valuable way to create obligations and to have them enforced by the courts if necessary. There's a value in the world of business to having your expectations, which are placed into a contract, being complied with on a regular basis. Some areas of contract law are governed by the common law and some are covered by statute law. So it's primarily a mixed match of what various sources of law. Most contracts involve the exchange of promises, and I guess the most common example is a bilateral contract. For example, I'll give you a very easy, I guess, illustration of a bilateral contract. I promise to buy your car for $100, and in exchange you provide me with a promise to sell me the car for $100. So as you can see, a bilateral contract is an exchange of promises. The promise you get in return for your promise is called consideration. Consent is an important element here. If both parties do not like their contract, they can always agree to terminate it. Now, a contract that does not involve the mutual exchange of promises, or that's not a bilateral contract, is referred to a unilateral contract. That means that instead of making a promise in exchange for receiving another promise, you merely perform an act. For example, I guess the most simple illustration would be if you find a lost dog and then you see a sign that says, I promise to pay a reward of $25 for the return of my lost dog. All you have to do is return the lost dog. You do not have to make a promise to the person that you will return the dog. Okay? So a unilateral contract is the exchange of an act for a promise. A case referred to in the textbook where a unilateral contract was found to exist was in the Carlisle versus Carbolic Smokeball Company. That's an 1893 English court decision. In that case, the Carlisle Smokeball Company advertised that if anyone used a product while they were sick and it did not work, in other words, make them better, they would be promised a reward of £100. Now, Mrs. Carlisle actually used this product for 2 weeks, but still remained sick. When the company refused to pay the advertised reward, she sued them in court and actually won. Now, there's one thing you should know about contracts, is that they can be frustrating in the sense that sometimes you may feel you're in a weaker bargaining position than the person you are contracting with. In other words, quite often you will be asked to enter into a contract drawn up by a large corporation whose lawyers have carefully reviewed the contract, and there is not much negotiating there. In other words, you take it or leave it. Now, there's a case in the textbook called Tilden versus Clendenning, a rent-a-car, where you can see that quite often a court will take into consideration a weaker bargaining position. In terms of making a contract consists of 4 elements: an offer, an acceptance, consideration, and an intention to enter into a contract. Contracts usually begin with an offer, which is defined as a promise to perform an act on specified terms. Now, is an advertisement an offer? An offer is different than a communication or sign that merely expresses a wish to do business. In law, something that can be characterized as an expression to do business or an invitation to receive an offer depends on an objective assessment of whether or not there was an intention to enter into the contract. Now, in the Carlisle versus Carbolic Smokeball case, there was that advertisement, but the court concluded that there was an intention to be contractually bound by the offer and the reward. So the company advertiser had to pay the money as the matter was deemed a contract involving an offer to use the product, and if it did not work, the user would be paid £100. Now, be careful. If you see a sign saying something like townhouses for sale at $99,000, this does not mean you can accept. In other words, you can't just walk into the sales office and say, here's my $99,000, I want my townhouse. Okay? This is because normally there are negotiations involved in the purchase and sale of a townhouse. Okay? A court would likely deem the sign as an invitation to treat an offer. This is different issue than false or misleading advertising. Okay? And now there are separate laws dealing with those type of issues. So, anytime you think there's a possibility or someone posting a sign or an advertisement, you'll notice that there'll be a little asterisk or a footnote to the actual writing, and it would say something like terms and conditions apply. That's basically a way to avoid a court saying that the sign was misleading or not an offer capable of acceptance. Thank you very much.